made at the end of the conversation, and now let me just find here our questions for today. And there's people out there knocking on the door. I think David's out there. Okay, so welcome. Thank you for being here today with us. So let's begin from the beginning. So you are a family physician. You're currently pursuing your PhD while researching more specifically the works of Jan Stevenson and Jim Tucker on children who report past life memories. What first drew you to this field? Was there a personal, scientific, or clinical experience that sparked your interest to begin with?
Yes, apparently there is no connection between family physician and being connected to these topics, especially children claiming past life memories. But I guess it's strictly connected to my own journey, personal journey, especially when I was a teenager. I had two important losses, and my aunt and my grandma, they died in the same year. And I guess at that moment, many things were transformed in me, and I started asking myself about the meaning of the things and trying to find some answers. And then when I had just entered medical school, I had a friend of mine who told me that he had become atheist. And that was really an important moment for me, because I started questioning that and my own faith and the things that I believed until that moment. And I was having some sort of connection with spiritism in the years before, and previously I was connected to Catholic Church, and then I just started questioning deeper and deeper each part and aspect, and trying to find if science could somehow answer my questions. And then in the beginning of the medical school, I had the opportunity to attend a conference virtually. It was a conference about the relation of mind and brain that was held in São Paulo, Brazil, and organized by Alexander Moreira Almeida, who became my advisor, my mentor in the future. But by that time, I got to know all these subjects and these topics. I got really excited about how Ian Stevenson could have rigor as a scientist and being open-minded and getting things together and making this investigation, which was so interesting. So by that time, I just thought, oh, perhaps one day I could try to investigate this and be into these topics too. So that's how everything began.
Okay, so so you talk about Ian Stevenson, right? And I think most people here at least heard of him, but I don't know, I think it would be good to maybe begin by understanding the scope of his research. So what are we talking about? What are we looking at when we talk about his work?
Perfect. Ian Stevenson was a Canadian, and he was a professor at the University of Virginia. He spent many years there. He was the director of the chairman there. And by the 60s of the last century, he started investigating cases of children who claimed past life memories. And what was actually this topic? Children saying that, oh, you're not my father, you're not my mother, mentioning aspects of a supposed previous life as what they had done, profession, the way they had died, especially violent deaths by that time, and also mentioning places. Oh, I lived in another city, sometimes 100, 200 kilometers away from that place, 300 kilometers away. So it was really intriguing, and somehow Stevenson was caught, and he started searching for an answer, and he understood that many people especially in the Eastern world, they use it to do their own investigations, and they tried to find who was supposedly was this child in the past life. And what Stevenson did was given a scientific background, using his scientific background to systematically investigate these topics and trying to understand if we could say that reincarnation would occur or not, or if there was
It's a feasible explanation.
if it was a feasible explanation, if there was another explanation for that, and started to thinking about many sort of things that could explain this phenomenon.
Do you know how many cases were investigated by him in totality?
Yes, actually, in the beginning, the amount of cases was like over 2,500 cases. Over 2,500 cases. But then he started to exclude some cases and being more rigorous about what would be the idea of a case. What he could say that's really a case. At least, for example, 6 statements that the child should have, and the child should manifest a behavior or at least one other aspect connected to the features that he had identified.
So a little bit more rigors of inclusion criteria for what would be qualified as good, solid cases.
Yes.
And then he ended up with how many?
Today we have there like over 2,200.
2,200. Okay. Now, before we got deeper into this, tell everybody what did you come here to do? So I saw him on Instagram, and we met years ago in Belo Horizonte, participating in the same conference, and I saw that he was in Virginia. And I was like, Eric, what are you doing in Virginia? And so, well, I'm getting my PhD, I'm doing my studies here. And I said, well, then stop by Miami on your way back home. And then, so you told me that you came here to criticize the work of Ian Stevenson. So please share your piece.
It's a complicated position, right? But in science, a good science is constructed with many people and not only one person saying things. So we need people outside looking at that work and being able to say things about that, to criticize somehow. So science, the advances that science can achieve comes from this. And it's important to bear this in mind. But the idea of my PhD study was trying to see if the best cases that Ian Stevenson had already recorded, and not only Stevenson, but all the best cases in the world that were investigated, because there were other researchers investigating these cases connected to Stevenson, but sometimes Stevenson was not the main researcher of that case, and the idea was checking if these cases could resist the main criticisms, especially those made by those skeptics, there are many skeptics in terms of movements, organized movements, especially here in the United States, who have many important criticisms about this whole work. And the idea was checking if it could resist these main criticisms, and also by the end seeing if the common explanations, when I say common, conventional explanations, I would mean the ones that we don't need some transcendental element to explain that. So if the conventional explanations could entirely explain the phenomenon, or if you need other things such as reincarnation to explain these best cases. So this was my my
So
mission.
someone who does not understand how science works could look at that and say, what is this guy doing? He's trying to destroy what we have today as the best evidence, scientific evidence around reincarnation. But your work is 100% in line with Kardec thinking.
Yes.
Right? So he really encouraged criticism and, you know, that the importance of, you know, the truth will resist, will, you know, can face anything, right? And so your work really comes to, seeks to strengthen by criticizing and by looking into the rigor and saying, well, some cases might be a little weak. In some cases, I truly don't see any other explanation other than considering reincarnation. So share with us, and please feel free to jump in if you guys have any questions. But I'm curious, this is something that we didn't talk a whole lot. Eric has been in my house for like a few days, so we've been talking about this. But it's a lot, but what is some of your findings? Can you say that some cases are disputable? You could not really resist the criticism, but some cases, on the other hand, you feel like that they're really solid. What did you came out with?
Yes, this is really interesting, this whole aspect, because when you were there, I was just reading the cases, and you start just like feeling many things about that, and having your own conclusions, and then your mind starts going to one direction, and then you find another thing, you go to another direction, and it's really curious, this whole process. But just before entering this, Stevenson used it to say that we had no perfect case. There was no perfect case, but in his mind, his thoughts were that we were able to find very interesting, intriguing cases that could resist criticisms, and we could consider reincarnation as an important and true hypothesis for those cases, although we could also consider other possibilities too. But for him, reincarnation for a group of a few cases was even a better option to explain. It would be less complex, even thinking about, oh, reincarnation, this would be really complex, but it would be less complex than assuming other things. For example, by chance, just numerous coincidences, many coincidences that we would have, oh, this is just a coincidence, and then another feature that he found in that case, oh, another coincidence, one more coincidence, and one more coincidence. When we look at all this and put together, the chance,
Right.
the odds
of all these coincidences happening, right?
The odds are
Yeah.
and for him, chance wouldn't couldn't explain really well, and it would be really complex to say this. But just to bring the idea here, there were 33 cases by the time of Stevenson that he considered really strong because of an investigation, of the moment of the investigation. Because sometimes the child starts claiming, and the investigator comes to the investigation like 5 years later, or 3 years later, 1 year later, and this is a huge problem, especially thinking about common communication that normal means that the child could access and just get to know that information and reproduce that even without being aware of that. And family too, child's family sometimes could think that, oh, my child couldn't know this, but somehow the family couldn't be really aware of all the possibilities of information and this transmission of information to his child, or her child. And I found among these best cases that we got written records made before investigation. So the child starts saying things, and the family or the investigator got written records of that, and then they found who was the supposed previous person, the deceased person whose life matched this child's statements. And this is really less probably we would think about a common transmission of information in these cases. It's harder to explain, and it's easier to check if there was a way of this child access the information. And we have a few good cases about this, of course, with child not stating everything correctly. And there are some statements that are wrong. And it's really important to think about how our memories work. And if we demand this child or these children to have an accuracy of 100%, it's not something feasible, thinking about the behavior of our memories, our common memories. And if we were talking about a possible past life memory, we should consider just like the same. That the memories may not be so precise. But there are cases that we have specific information, and it's really hard to say about some way of normal transmission of this information to that child, and with a good accuracy, a good precision in terms of those statements, and also with behaviors associated with the whole context. And the child starts behaving just like the supposed previous person. Actually had many aspects. For example, a phobia was developed, combining the mode of death of this the supposed previous person to the statements that the child was claiming. And she said, oh, for example, I was in a place and then I fell in the river and I drowned there. I got drowned. And then when she was a little child, was about 2 years old, she was really avoiding water and all the contact with water. She got like in panic because of that. So she had a specific phobia focused on water, and also made many statements about a supposed life and all connected to this context.
Any questions from you guys?
I'd like to make a few comments on that.
Come a little closer so we can hear it.
Okay. Well, first of all, very nice to meet you. We had a brief discussion before that my path into spiritism was very much because of taught by Daniel Assis, who talked a lot about reincarnation. He came to Conscious Living about 15 years ago, and I saw that talk, and he talked about Ian Stevenson, and I really studied it, and that's really was my path in. But I think that there's a couple of aspects. One is that children, when they start to verbally communicate, 3 or 4, right, and then these memories start to occur, but as they get to 6, 7, and 8, those memories finally disappear, right? So the window is very small. But of the evidence that Ian Stevenson covered, one of the aspects was physical defects, where a child had died in a thrashing machine on the farm, and in his next life he had no fingers, or there's another case of a bullet, right, that went in, and the child had a scar where the bullet supposedly exited the body of the previous life. So it's really fascinating, the whole area. But what I've been following the Department of Psychic Studies, is it called DOPS?
The Division of Perceptual Studies.
Perceptual Studies, yeah. And after Stevenson died, then Tim Tucker took over, and apparently now he's retired. And then they have another area in that group that look at past lives, NEDs, right?
Near-death experiences.
Experiences. And a whole gamut of studies. But what always strikes me when I listen to videos, there's a lot of information out there, but they never seem to align the reason behind this reincarnation. And I asked Eric, when he was there for a few weeks, did he have the opportunity to talk about spiritism and see if they could join the dots, as it were. So
Yes, that's an important point, because when you're saying about this research, you're saying something really empirical, and it's hard to provide us many other informations, but that one of survival or not survival, of the hypothesis. So going to a theory that could explain the whole phenomenon, I guess it's an advanced part that we are not actually investigating in details, and it's hard to have this investigated. For example, Stevenson tried to find if there were evidences for the idea of karma, and just checking the supposed past life and the current life, and seeing if there were details and some connections, and couldn't find many things in most of the cases. In one case or the other, he looks at that and maybe, this could be connected to the idea that people on the Eastern world brings of karma, but most of the cases we can't say much about this. It's hard. But also, I guess it's really important to reflect about how these things touch the people who experience, and how intense are the impacts on their lives, and the sense of responsibility that may be present there. And
you mean the life of the kids who have those memories?
Yes.
And the people around them?
Following up this, for example, during my master's, I conducted research following up on children who claimed past life memory. Actually, I assessed adults 50 years after their claims, or after a first moment of investigation. Hernani Guimarães Andrade was a spiritist person, an investigator on these topics too. He had interviewed many of these children by that time, and then I searched for these people after almost 50 years and to see how they were and how was their quality of life, mental health, perception of impact on their lives, of the impact of the phenomenon, interpretation they had about that, and why they think that happened that way. And so it was really interesting to see these subjective perceptions, but in an objective way, in a more empirical way, to have these ideas, these theories. I guess we're a little bit distant from this yet. I guess it could be another step for the future. Maybe this first one is to discuss deeper and to see, reincarnation could really be stated as something possibly true based on the phenomenon we have.
Yeah, I have two comments. I think I have two comments. One comment. So, what comes to mind, I hear what David is talking about. So, like, so there's all these research, and then there is spiritism, and we like, is there a connection somewhere, somehow? Are we able to bring that up into the academic field? And you were sharing with me the resistance that you guys, that your group in Brazil, where spiritism is huge, and how you guys have a lot of pressure and accusations of actually using science to justify your spiritual beliefs.
Yeah.
So talk about that a little bit.
Yes, and the really complicated thing is sometimes, in sharing here with you my feelings about all this, many times I faced conflict inside me about this, because fearing being criticized, not because of my work, but because of my belief. And this is really complicated. And there's no problem to criticize the work. And the work is there, and yes, we need these, we need to have great discussions, we need to have someone who's perhaps being able to see a detail that we are not seeing perfect. And then we'll try to do it better and improve the work, the methodology, and that's how, as I stated here before, science works. But something that unfortunately is happening nowadays, we're facing this, is to have especially the ones who have more projection, because I'm just starting my career on this field, but like people who have more projection, who are already stating things and presenting the works and doing really good job, they face this all the time, and facing accusation about the intention they have and about their position as researcher. So I think sometimes this is really cruel.
Yeah.
And this is something that makes no sense. Everyone actually wants the truth. And if someone is atheist, okay. And someone considers that you die and nothing else happened, okay. But as we can develop our work in the sense that our beliefs are not guiding this work, but our beliefs are sustaining us we have personal lives. You're individuals, so we have our own beliefs.
Yeah, so the accusation is that there's bias in the research.
Yeah, we would have bias because we would have a tendency always to look at the things by the side of survival and other things because of spiritism.
Right.
But for example, for me, it's the opposite. I'm only connected to spiritism because of this work. So, as I face good evidence of survival, for me nowadays, spiritism makes sense. But if I see things which are different, as I really like what Kardec used to say, oh, you just throw spiritism away and stay with science in terms of the truth. We're pursuing the truth. So I have no problem of doing these things. But as I see that things are connecting, I'm not trying to prove spiritism once that I know that science can't prove any religion. Especially because one of the main points of spiritism is the existence of God. And many researchers, and I'm included here, we believe that God is not a scope, is not in the scope of science. It's the scope of philosophy, but not of science. So I know that science could investigate phenomena that spiritism was also connected to, but not trying to prove anything there. So this sort of accusation makes no sense.
Carlos has a question.
It's not really a question, but spiritism part, reincarnational part, subjectivism part, science has already stated that it has changed a lot as far as what to consider the object of apprehension, which methodology and purpose. Science, through dialectic thought, has evolved and denied science. Right? Science has proved that it's a sequence of mistakes in approximation of a possible truth. Because if you had a dimension of truth from the very beginning to start identification, it's over. If I knew how big truth is from the very beginning, I don't have to investigate, it's already there. Right? It's the same as if you say, do you speak German? Yes, 60%. How is 6% if you don't know the 100%? How you grab the 6% of your knowledge if you are not aware of 100%? So science per se has evolved. There was a moment that the subject and the object of analysis coincided when I factor in human being. While I'm studying biology and leaves, for example, or chemistry or physics, but the moment that I put men here in history, in society, sociology, in philosophy, in psychology, I already had to change a little bit what is the object of approach. And inside psychology, if I go to psychiatry, say it's more precise, it's more medical, it's more measurable, but what if I go to the paranormality, the metaphysical aspect, right? So when you say what a child claims, may be claiming from her or her own thought, her own imagination or past life, or being intuitively suggested by others. So the very important thing here for me is not to prove, because to me personally, the person that is closest to God is the scientist. It's not the philosopher, it's not the religious person, it's the one that is on a daily basis looking at what he knows. It's not the whole thing. And the whole thing is God. And he sees a pattern of perfectiveness. Perfect here, perfect here, perfect here. There must be something originating this perfection. So to me, science is already an answer that there will be not the whole truth. It's very naive to believe there will be the whole truth.
And there was an interesting skeptic, Carl Sagan, that he used it to say that to be able to state complex things, we would need to have complex evidence to. So as much higher the idea you bring, the evidence must be with a higher quality, and you have to push up and trying to do it fantastically. And I do agree with this. But sometimes people try to use this to say that, oh, what you're trying to do is not enough. You'll never be able to using this sort of methods because they have many details on it and possible explanations and possible things that it won't be really clear. Only one answer as you just look at that and have the answer. They say it's not a good way to do science, and that anyone should spend time with these sort of things.
Because if we think philosophically science, we have the illusion that science is going for the future. But science by definition is past. I have a paradigm. A paradigm is past. That's my starting point for an investigation. If I think I'd like to prove, is something that is already suspected to be.
Yeah.
So by definition, any starting point, any theory is already a past thing, limited because it comes from a finite mind, trying to grasp what is infinite.
Yeah.
So by definition, I will never get the whole. It will be philosophical, a paradox,
Yes.
and even absurdity.
So yeah,
For sure.
Going back, Einstein's famous statement that science without religion is naive, but religion without science is blind. I think that really sums it up.
We have 15 minutes, so I want to kind of get,
Yeah, and a question is, the reincarnation, what I understand the process is perfect, what was created. Those persons, those child that they had that type of life, that remember the past life. This is something like if there is an investigation, like there is a flaw that because we are not supposed to remember the past life, just to, it's like a flaw, something like was a gift to the person who knows what happened, thoughts. There is an investigation around why.
so the question is just for the video too.
Because
So the
we have
question
now,
is,
for example, the birthmark is, we have explanation on many of this.
so just to be sure, so are you asking why certain children have these
When we are
memories where
supposed not to
the
have-
majority don't? We're not supposed to remember our past necessarily.
That's a good question, and to answer this, it will depend on the hypothesis we consider to explain the phenomenon. If we consider reincarnation, of course, the idea to perhaps explain this would be that traumatic deaths maybe get some perceptions, mental perceptions, which are really strong on these individuals, on consciousness, on these minds, and then perhaps making things easier to be recalled in another moment. So for example, if I ask you about the clothes you were wearing last week, exactly on Sunday, you say, oh, I don't remember, but if something happened, for example, if you were drinking a soda and then the soda, just spread over your shirt, you
And
perhaps
it was a brand new shirt, just to make it more
Yes.
dramatic.
and a brand new shirt.
Yeah.
Perhaps you just I remember because I was drinking soda, and you do this way, this pathway to connect it to this memory. So all the times that we have emotion, things get stronger and perhaps easier to be recalled. And when we're talking about these birthmarks, birth defects, it's an important discussion because just really briefly.
Let me just open a quick parenthesis because I always like to say we're here to discuss many things, but this is a spiritist center where we believe in reincarnation. So the spirit does not finish reincarnating completely to the age of 7 years old, and so this is a time where there is some flexibility, and a lot of times memories can be much more readily available. And it's interesting because I was asking, here in the US, once in a while you see on the news, like the case of the pilot, there was on the news, and all I see is boys. So I said, did you investigate case of girls? And he said, who has more violent deaths? Well, men die more violently through war, through accidents, and things like that. So it was kind of an interesting, because I'm like, I have yet to hear a case of a girl. I personally have not heard. I'm sure, and he said no, there are, but so in any case, I just want to open this parenthesis for the people who might be listening in the future. Maybe not everybody knows so much about spiritism, so I like to kind of, but go ahead, I didn't mean to.
And also about the birthmarks connected with this, and these impressions, these imprints, and perhaps something was so traumatic, and the image, for example, the consciousness created during the death was of, for example, the person got shot. And the idea of the bullet entering in a way and just going through the individual's head, and perhaps the feeling, the perception was so strong that during the formation of the body, in the supposed next incarnation, this formation was somehow influenced by the individual's mind.
Right.
So we got this alteration due to this hypothesis that we bring here. But mentioning about the girls' cases, one of the strongest cases I found there was of a girl in Sri Lanka.
Okay.
And she was, I guess when she started saying, just checking here, not to say, I opened here her case, just to say correctly, but just by the age of 3 years, I guess, yes. She was born actually 2 years old. She started saying things, normal things. She was developing the ability of speech. And just a little bit later, especially about three and a half, the main statements about supposed previous life came on. And then it was a really interesting case because the supposed previous person was 300 kilometers away. And it was a case of drowning. And she said she was in a place and she fell in the river, and she was with a dumb man together. They use this expression to mute people by that time. And she was giving the details that their parents used to have a flower shop just next to the road, to a specific road, and give the some other informations of names and other things. And the investigators went there and tried to find everything. They recorded all the statements before proceeding with this investigation. So it was really interesting the moment that they arrived there. And she got two things wrong. For example, no, I'll give the two things that she stated wrongly. The name of the father, she said it was Ratu Herat, but actually it was another name. But she had an uncle, she supposed to had an uncle in the past life with the name, the second name Herat, but means nothing. So, and the other point was about the father. She said he was bald, but he wasn't. But all the other statements, there were some statements which were not verified. They couldn't find elements to check if they were true or not. But there were like more than 30 items, and they were correct.
They were correct. Like what?
For example, I lived in Cataragama. That was the place there. Cataragama is far away. My father was a priest. He worked at the Cataragama shrine. He also had a flower shop near Quiriverreira. That was the road there. My father had been a cultivator. I was pushed by a dumb person to the river. So this element was really interesting because when they tried to investigate, the person who was drowned had a dumb brother who was with her, was the only person with her when she fell in the river and got drowned. And Stevenson was really interesting because he tried to see the rates of drowning in the region and how many flower shops they could find in that road, and how many, thinking about those flower shops, how many parents could have lost a daughter, and trying to check all the details to see if it was something general or really specific. And he found really specific things. Although, for example, 20 flower shops, but only one that had people there who had lost a family member, and specifically a daughter, and specifically drowned in that river, and with a dumb person together. So it was something really coincident.
How long between the reincarnation and the death?
That's a good
This
question.
case, 1.5 years.
Oh wow.
How long?
So all the people
1.5 years.
So all the people were
No, that
still
means that
alive.
she died in 1.5 years she was reincarnated?
Yeah.
Wow.
Actually, many cases, the time between
Maybe
lives
that explains too a
is
little
really
bit of
short,
the memory.
actually.
Why the memories? Because if it's so close, the incarnations, that might be a factor.
The mean time is just like 16 months.
The meantime is
Yeah.
16 months. Wow. Sherry?
I'm wondering if there's any understanding about the amount of reports over the course of time. Is there any idea that there's more now than there used to be? I mean, I know that they weren't always investigated, so it's like would be an artifact to some degree. But are there any ideas about that? This is also at the global level, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is around the world reports.
Yes, unfortunately, we don't have many researchers in this
I was
field.
wondering around the world, not
Yes,
many
and-
collaborators.
Yeah, and doing this work, especially after Stevenson died, We got just a few ones, and which were like retiring, and now some others have already died too. So we have a new generation of researchers emerging now and trying to connect somehow to the past investigation, but we don't have this, and not even this sort of numbers. We had difficulties in terms of knowing the prevalence of the phenomenon
That's what I was wondering.
in many
What
places.
level?
But for example, we have only one good study of prevalence in North India. In a specific place, it was just one child claiming for 450 other child. So it was 1 to 450. It was a really high prevalence there. But I guess it's really different from other places, especially because there they have this culture and this idea of reincarnation, and somehow they feel more comfortable to speak about this, although many times the parents fear this because they think that their child will die prematurely. And that's an important belief there, and they try to do many things, sometimes violently, to make this child stop talking about an alleged previous life.
All right, well, we came to, it goes fast, it goes really fast, but you want to talk about this?
Yes, I don't know if you know children from 3 to 6 years old, but at the University of Virginia, Marietta, who is the investigator now, the senior investigator there, and also postdoc researcher Saida, they are doing some research involving children who claim past life memory, and also control groups. And so they need children who don't claim past life memories from 3 to 6 years old to apply some sort of tests, actually in a really light way, through games and learning tests connected to language, to memory, and using virtual conversation. I guess they use Zoom. So if you know or have a child in this just this range of age, it would be really nice to be enrolled in this research, and would give an important contribution.
Yeah.
And they give a $10 Amazon gift card
To the child.
to those who agree to take part in this study. So here's the invitation. We'll just attach there.
We'll put it over there. All right. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
We are going to go to the second part of our